I'm really excited to reconnect with you again. There's been a lot of changes over the past couple of years in the law school admissions world. Most notably, in the past year or so would be the SCOTUS ban on affirmative action. I'm really curious to get your thoughts on how that's impacting this particular admission cycle. Anything you want to share about yourself and your background and what you do with barrier breakers before diving into that, though?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, I am the founder and executive director here at Barrier Breakers. Barrier Breakers is an education nonprofit that specializes in working with first generation minority and immigrant students on the college and law school application process. But we help everyone, regardless of their background. I've been doing admissions work for more than 10 years. We've got a fantastic team collectively. We have more than 40 years of admission experience between us, and we love helping students, not just through the application process, but we have continuing resources for current law school students as well. So, really excited to be talking about this topic.
That's wonderful. Yeah, you're doing great work with barrier breakers. I definitely encourage everyone to check it out. I know you have a conference coming up as well.
Yes, the Break Into Law conference that'll be this summer. It's free. It's completely free. There's a few days of panels with law school deans and admissions professionals, professors, litigators in the field. But there's also a law school fair. We're expecting between 40 and 60 law schools to attend based on last year's attendance. And there's also a career fair. So if you are a current law school student and you're looking for a job still, there are law firms that are really excited to recruit diverse candidates. So definitely make sure to come. And like I said, it's free.
Wonderful. Well, I'll definitely encourage everyone to check it out. I'll include a link in the description below this video for anyone who wants to RSVP for that conference. Love to dive in with you now about the topic on the agenda. We have, the SCOTUS ban on affirmative action. If you could just maybe give folks some background on what happened for those who weren't following the story, what happened last year, how that impacted applications, then we could dive into what's happening at this point in this cycle.
Yeah, so over the summer in June, the Supreme Court struck down the admissions policy that allowed for race-conscious admissions. So basically, what that means is that prior to the Supreme Court ruling, schools were allowed to take race into consideration as one of many factors. It was never allowed to be the only factor. Students never just got in because of their race, but race was one of many factors, part of a holistic admission decision as they're taking into consideration a student's background and GPA and work experience and LSAT score and all of these other things. Race was just one of many factors as it impacts a student's identity and maybe their lived experiences and some of the obstacles that they may or may not have had to overcome. With the Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action or race-conscious admissions policies, schools are no longer allowed to consider an applicant's race in the traditional sense. However, the opinion noted that nothing in their ruling prevents a student from disclosing or talking about their race in their essays, especially as it relates to things like hardship or courage. We talk a lot about different ways that your culture may have given you courage or values, or different experiences that you've had that would bring a uniqueness to the school. So students are more than happy to, they're more than able to talk about those things in their essays. Sometimes students ask me, can I still talk about race in my essays? Absolutely. But it is up to the students to disclose that and to talk about that. And admissions professionals can only take it into consideration in a very narrow set of criteria and factors, but schools can no longer ask what your race is. There's no more checkbox on the application, and they can't take race into consideration the same way they might have if you're thinking about, if you're an underrepresented minority and how that puts your LSAT score or your GPA into context. Those sort of things can't really be done in the same way anymore.
Right, right. Understood. Thanks for the rundown. So I'm curious now, I've seen that law schools are no longer really using diversity statements as they used to. So that's a prompt that doesn't really exist anymore. But schools, from what I've seen, they've replaced that with in some cases, optional essay prompts that are a bit more unique to their school. So I'm wondering, from the applicant perspective, someone who might have previously felt like they wanted to write a diversity statement, what really changes for them, given that they could still share their racial or ethnic background in one of these optional essays or in their personal statement? Does anything really change from the applicant perspective in that sense?
So it does and it doesn't, right? Like I said, I've been doing admissions work for more than 10 years. And a lot of the tips and a lot of the strategies that we're telling our students are the same strategies that we've been telling our students in terms of writing a strong personal statement and a diversity or optional statement. But there are some things that are different. So I've never advocated for students just inserting race in their personal statement where it maybe doesn't make sense. For example, if you are very passionate about animal law and that's why you want to go to law school, just a random paragraph about being a Black woman might not fit in your narratives around why animal law is, the type of law that is really moving you to pursue law school. And so you might want to put that in an optional statement or a diversity statement. However, if you are an applicant that is really passionate about immigration law because of your own personal experiences, well, then yes, your race and your culture are absolutely germane to the reason that's bringing you to law school. And so it should be part of your personal statement. Right. And so those things are always the same. That's the same advice that we'd give before or after the Supreme Court ruling. But when we look at the diversity statements or the optional essay prompts, you do really want to make sure that you're still answering the prompt. So for a lot of students, their diversity statement, colloquially as you will, can still fit most of the optional prompts that schools have. So for a lot of students, they won't have to write anything more than the standard personal statement and diversity statement. But for some schools, the optional prompts have changed. I think Stanford is a really great example of this. Um, don't just copy and paste your diversity statement into Stanford's optional essay prompt because it's asking a pretty specific question about a conversation or a time when you've had a different thought about something. Now you can workshop your diversity statement that you've written to fit that prompt, that as long as you're answering the prompt. But I think the place where I want to caution students is just don't just assume, well, I'll just slap my diversity statement in all of these optional essays. I'm not going to read the prompts. I'm just going to put them there. It'll be fine. Really make sure that your diversity statement is fitting the prompts because schools can tell, and it seems a little lazy, to be honest, when you're not actually answering the prompt, when you're not treating each school as a unique entity. So the long way of saying, yes, still write a regular diversity statement, but you may need to tweak that for certain schools. And there are some schools where you might end up, if they have a lot of shorter essays, you might end up breaking up a diversity statement into a couple of different essays. So you're still getting the same content across, but maybe in different ways.
Understood. So maybe a little bit more work to fit a unique prompt, but students can still communicate the same essence they would have communicated thematically from a diversity
Yes.
statement into one of these other optional essay prompts.
Absolutely. I always say your application is like a puzzle, right? You've got all these different pieces, and it's about where do the pieces go to make the whole application. And so, maybe you're breaking things up or you're putting things in different places, but you can still get all of the content across. It's just how you do it that might have changed a little bit.
Okay, okay. I have one last question related to the application side, and then we could maybe switch gears and talk about what's happening right now in this cycle. So, this is a question I've seen all over the place. I mean, given the SCOTUS ban on affirmative action or the race conscious admissions, does the URM boost still apply if an applicant works in their diversity statement into one of these other prompts, or maybe will URM applicants not see the same advantage they would have seen in previous cycles?
So that's a very difficult question. Technically, the answer is no. It will, we'll see how it actually plays out this cycle, but technically, schools are only allowed to consider an applicant's race in certain contexts as they disclose in their essay, as it relates to unique experiences, character, courage, a value, those sort of things. They're not really supposed to take a student's race into consideration for other things like GPA or LSAT score or any of those other factors that they use to on a more holistic lens. However, what we may see, and I can't speak for schools, and I also want to note that every school is handling this differently. This is new to every school, except for maybe the schools in Michigan and California, which actually have been operating with this regime for a bit. Because their states had already had sort of their own race conscious admission ban, if you will. So, Michigan and California, nothing really new there. But for other states and other schools in other states, this is new for everyone this year. And so every school is going to be handling this differently. But what I will say is maybe there is not that underrepresented minority URM LSAT bump that we might have seen. But maybe there are different points or weight given to some of these things that we see in these essays, right? And those don't necessarily even have to be specifically about race. It could, affect first generation students, right? Students that have had to overcome some hardship in their educational background or hardship in their socioeconomic status, right? And so we might see some more weight given to that, which could end up evening out to how it looked before when there was a URM bump, right? So the weighting might be in different places, the end result might be similar. I think all schools really do care about building a diverse class, and I know that all of the admission deans are working really hard to abide by the letter of the law, of course, but to still make sure that they are creating pathways for students who come from underrepresented backgrounds or disadvantaged backgrounds to be able to get full consideration in the law school process. So I don't think the exact same bump is going to be possible, but I do think we might see it happening in different ways.
Fair enough. Yeah, I suppose we'll see how it shakes out when this cycle finishes up. And as you mentioned, these schools are trying to figure out how to navigate this while still adhering to the letter of the law, but at the same time looking to create diverse classes. So I'm wondering, to what extent is that responsible for the speed or lack thereof that we're seeing in this admission cycle, where applicants are just waiting and waiting and waiting for several months? I mean, what do you see, what do you hear is going on in the admissions offices right now?
Yeah, this is a slow cycle. This is a slow cycle for many reasons. There is the fact that I do think that admissions offices are trying to really take their time and make sure they get it right. Probably inevitably, someone will feel like they didn't get it right. And, while I'm not wishing it, I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up seeing more lawsuits. But I think they're really trying to get it right. And so they're trying to take their time with applicants, which is causing a delay. The other thing is just logistically, some schools have more essays. However, they did not hire more people. So if you have more work, but the same number of people, it's just going to take a little longer. And I think schools are reacting to that. I do both college and law school admissions, and in the undergraduate world, the number of essays per school has really gotten out of hand in a number of ways. But those are much bigger offices by design, right? And they're set up to sort of read 8 supplemental essays per applicant. Like, why? But they're set up that way because they know, and they've done this, and they've had many years of perfecting this. And for law schools, it's traditionally been most applicants write a personal statement, some applicants write a diversity statement, and we move on. And now we're starting to see, oh, we've got these, 4 essays, 3 essays, 5 essays, and it's new, right? And so the cadence and how they work and work-life balance, and there's so many things that go into admissions office. It's been a hard year for higher ed in general across the board. And so I think there's some human element to people just need more time, and it's just going to take a little bit longer. And of course, there's also other things like FAFSA delays, right? So there's so many things that are going into making this a very weird year for admissions and higher ed. And I think it is translating to just a slower cycle.
Right, right, right. That all makes perfect sense. So I suppose if someone is waiting months longer than they would have in the past, that is not necessarily an indication of
Right.
of a negative result in the end. It could just be that schools are waiting through a backlog.
Yes, and I know some people are like, okay, but some people have gotten their admissions letters. And yes, law school admissions has always also been a comparative cycle, right? It's holistic and comparative. So there are still going to be people who have already heard, have heard sooner, and you might be wondering, why you haven't heard, but I would caution you to assume the worst. Sometimes no news is good news. It just means that they're taking their time with your application.
Okay, okay, I suppose that's good. So I think we pretty much covered it. Is there anything that we missed on this topic, or anything else in general you wanted to share before we wrap up, Sydney?
I think that it's just really important this year, probably more than ever, that students are really sharing what they're going through and making sure that every part of their application speaks to that. So making sure that your resume, if there are gaps because of COVID or because of a family member sickness or an emergency, that that's explained somewhere, maybe as an asterisk on your resume, that if you have use of the additional information section, the addenda, right, that you're using your addenda wisely. I think there are a lot of places for students to still advocate for themselves if they are, especially from an underrepresented background in the application process. There's also places for you to note if you're really involved in like a Black student union or a Muslim student association or whatever cultural or ethnic group, like that makes it on your resume or your activities list. Just not to overlook those things. Sometimes I think those soft factors really do get rushed and overlooked, but really make sure that you have fully conveyed your full self on the application this year.
Of course. Yeah, it really could make a difference.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a number of ways that we can help you here at Barrier Breakers. We are a nonprofit, so all of our services are on a sliding scale to comply with our mission to help first generation underrepresented students, also veterans, single moms, LGBTQ students. We want to help you no matter who you are. And so we have one-on-one advising, we have small group boot camps, and then we also have a la carte essay editing, and our Master Your Personal Statement and Diversity Statement course is completely for free if you have an LSAT fee waiver. That's just our gift to you. It's a 4-week course that really walks you through the fundamentals of building your personal statement and diversity statement and is 100% free. If you don't have a fee waiver, it's like $19. But just email us and we'd be happy to work with you if that presents a hardship. But we want you to be able to have the tools that you need to succeed.
Wonderful, Sydney. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm really excited to get the word out about this. So I'll include the links to the program below the video. And if anyone has any questions, of course, I'll encourage them to reach out to you.
Thanks so much.